Vision is mine. And I don't want to belittle that, and I want to make sure that the brothers of AGL know that I appreciate it, that I appreciate you. I really respect this chapter. When I graduated from Howard University, I moved to New York. I moved into the Alpha House on 141st Street and Convent Avenue. It's the AGL house, the old house. I was a resident of the house and a member of that chapter. It's a good thing that I'm ice cold because there were times where the heat wasn't working. Amen. I just consider it an honor to be here. When Brother Becky called me, I was honestly surprised, and I didn't think that I would get the nod. And when he said, you got it, I was shocked. So I just want you guys to know that I appreciate this. And when I thought about coming back home, this is the first place I came to after I left my undergraduate chapter. And when you come in undergrad, some of you know that's your first fraternal family. When I crossed in spring '90, which is 25 years ago, I remember when I first met the general president at that time. We were going to a chapter meeting at New Lambda, and I was walking over to Crampton Blackburn Center on Howard University's campus. I was passing by Crampton Auditorium, and the limousine pulled up, and the door opens, and it's me and a couple of my line brothers, and we got on Alpha jacket, Alpha hat, Alpha socks, Alpha wristbands, I have the sunglasses. And limousine pulls up, and the general president steps out of the limousine, and I'm like, oh. And he walks over to us to Blackburn, and I'm just in awe. This is the general president. I'm just in awe. And we get to the chapter meeting at New Lambda, and at that time, the decision was being made as to where our national headquarters was going to be moved to. It was currently in Chicago. And they had a few cities discussing. It was Atlanta, it was New York, different places. And DC was not on the conversation, nor was Baltimore. And I went to that meeting, fresh Leo, maybe 8 days in the fraternity. And I'm in awe of Brother Ponder, who was the president, the general president. And when I tell you, them brothers at New Lambda let him have it, they let him have it out the style. And when he left that meeting, the national office is now in Baltimore, Maryland. So I got a good taste up front of what business is like. And I love the fact that this fraternity is about business. And so I thought about the fact that I graduated from Howard, and the first place I moved to was here. And I came and moved into Harlem, into the Alpha House, and I began to think about some of the times that I was up here with the brothers I spent good time with, the brothers of Ada Chapter, the brothers of ZZL, the brothers of AGL. And last couple of weeks, I've been thinking about some of the experiences that I had while I was living here. And one of the things that I remember doing was around 1995, 96, somewhere around there, we took a road trip. Now, let me preface this story, because this lady's in the house, and we are in church. So let me preface this story, okay? Y'all gonna have to forgive me, because I was young, the brothers were young, we were young guys, a couple of years in the frat. And so there were some things, young brothers, we do things that, we do some things, right? So we decided to road trip down to Baltimore, Maryland, because the ladies in Alpha Kappa Alpha were having their roulette. And we drive down there, about 18 guys in a little Volkswagen, we get down there. You know how bros roll back in the day. So we get down there, and so we get down into the harbor, and we're just out there chilling out. And the ladies are out there, it's their roulette. So it's, thousands of out there, AKAs walking around. And so one of the brothers, I'm not gonna suggest that the brother was from the chapter, but one of the brothers said, we should rate the ladies on how good they look. And let's think of a way that we can rate the ladies instead of giving 1 to 10. Let's find a way to rate the ladies. And so one of the brothers, I'm not saying it was me, but one of the brothers said, well, let's put them on a jewel scale. Now, for those of you who are not in a fraternity, you know that we have 7 founders that we affectionately know as Jewels, and we always list their names in alphabetical order by their last name. So Jewel Henry Arthur Callis is always first. Jewel Vertman Woodson Tandy is always last. So the brothers made this jewel scale, so if a lady was exceptionally beautiful, she'd be a Callis. If the lady was, cute, decent, she might be a Jones. If the lady was a Tandy, said, so he just crossed, and he actually had the audacity to walk up to who he considered a callous, and he said, excuse me, what jewel are you? And she said, what? And he looked back at us, and we all. So anyway, I'm thinking about that particular trip as I was getting ready to come up here. And the question that kind of popped in my head made it ironic, was, which jewel are you? And when I got the idea to write the first book, my first book, I came out in 2006 at our centennial. It's based on the founding of the fraternity. I told the story as a novel, because most alphas know their history. You know the history book, you know how we were founded, why we were founded, when we were founded. But one of the things I wanted to do in the book was to give a human side to the jewels, because a lot of Greeks see their founders as visionary gods. And these guys weren't visionary gods, they were college students. And they had a good idea. They didn't even know it would be this large at this time. They weren't thinking 109 years. They were thinking about keeping black men on campus, because there was no system in place to keep black men on campus. If they were failing in school, they were failing in life. If they were failing in life, they were failing out of Cornell. So they began a literary society to help keep these brothers matriculating through Cornell. That's where this whole thing started, and the brotherhood that came from that concept is why we're sitting here today wearing black and gold. So in 2006, I had this idea, but one of the things about the book, I said I got to get the personality of these guys, because they're not just gods, they're not just these unhuman beings. These were college students, they were 17 years old. So I had to look and research these. I had to go out in the morning spin guard and get some information. I had to go to the old space magazines and get some information. I had to look at Booker T. Washington's writings and W.E.B. Du Bois' writings, because they were studying Booker T and then W.E.B. And then looked at these things, and I'm looking at where they were from, and who their parents were, and who their grandparents were. And I found out that these guys had different personality from one another. They weren't all cut from the same cloth. Chapman was 28 years old, Callous was 17. So you can't have the same mindset when you're 17 than when you're 28. So I said, let me get to know these guys. And as I'm writing the book, I said these guys were different than one another. And I look at the fraternity now. I've traveled all over the country. I've been in South Africa a couple times. I've been to Brazil a couple times. And I remember, I was on an airplane. This is a true story. I was on an airplane to South Africa one time, right? And it was December 3rd. And while we were in the air, we hit midnight. And at Beta Chapter, every year on December 3rd at midnight, we meet at Rankin Chapel, and we grip and we sing the hymn, and we say how special Alpha is to us. So I'm over the Atlantic Ocean at midnight, December 3rd, turning into Founders Day, and we decided on the airplane, 7 Alphas, to get up and sing the hymn on the airplane. And as we got up on the airplane and sing the hymn, 3 brothers we didn't know were on the plane got up and sang with us. Right. Alpha is everywhere. So I'm saying to myself, what jewel am I? What jewel are you? Are you a callous? Because Joel Henry Arthur Callous was a thinker. He was methodical. Look at the notes from the early meetings. He was the secretary. He took down everything. That's how I was going to write the book, because his notes were so meticulous. He was a thinker. He was the one who started exactly on time. He was not playing around. He had everything down pat. If he wasn't there, notes weren't taken. But he never missed a meeting, so notes were always taken. And this guy was a thinker. So how many of you are thinkers? All of us are smart. All of us are thinkers. But how many of you are meticulous? How many of you get the details down? How many of you don't miss a beat, don't miss a note? Every single thing you do is by order and agenda. If that's you, then you are a callous. Are you a callous? Are you a Chapman? Joel Charles Henry Chapman was 28 years old when the fraternity was founded. 28 years old. He was returning to school. He already owned 2 businesses. He owned a brickyard and a cafe. How do you own a brickyard and a cafe in a white town in 1905, 1906? How do you go back to school at 20 years old and decide to get with these 17-year-olds and start a fraternity? Look at his speeches. His words were always short. Because when you're mature, you say what you mean and you mean what you say, and you don't have time for gibberish. So Charles Henry Chapman was a little more mature than everyone else. My father, when he speaks, he's a man of very few words, because he's much more mature than I am. When I speak, I talk all day long. I'm not a Chapman, y'all. I'm not a Chapman. Are you a Charles Henry Chapman? Are you a Jones? Julie Jean Kinkle Jones was an influencer. He was the only Jew who was not there when the school year began in 1905. He was on that first line in the fall of 1906. So if he was on that first line in the fall of 1906 with two other guys, then he must have been somewhat of a great guy in the first years of our fraternity to him to be considered a jewel 45, 50 years later. So here's this guy who became the head of the National Urban League. And he served the National Urban League longer than any predecessor to this day. But to this day, the head of the Urban League has always been Brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha. The president of the National Urban League's father was the general president of Alpha Phi Alpha. Go down to New Orleans and go to the convention center. It is named the Dutch Montreal Convention Center. Dutch Montreal is the general president of Alpha Phi fraternity. So this brother, this jewel is so influential, y'all, that he is the only jewel where both his father and son are brothers. So how influential are you that you start a fraternity that your father pledges? It's one thing if I become a brother and my dad is impressed with the brotherhood and he pledges. There was no brotherhood back then. There was no conventions. He was so influential in that thing that his son came in and his dad came in.
Wow.
That's called raised by an alpha man, hashtag.
Yeah.
Are you a Kelly? Jewel George Biddle Kelly was a fighter. Every chapter has a fighter. That one dude that will throw a chair in the middle of the meeting. Every chapter has a Kelly. Am I right?
Nope.
See, nowadays, we don't call him Kelly, we call him Brother Tuttle. We call him Howard Kingfish Franklin. We have names for our Kellys nowadays. Every chapter has a Kelly. Matter of fact, can I be real with y'all?
Yeah.
Some of y'all Kellys can just stay off Facebook. Some of y'all Kellys can stay at that Alpha AKA group on Facebook.
Right on.
But you know, I'm just gonna sip my tea on that. When the literary society was a concept, there were people who were in the group who were not in favor of the literary society becoming a fraternity. Then there were some in the group that were of the idea of transitioning to a fraternity, okay? And the history book states that when they had their votes, the vote was always even, it was deadlocked. But because there was an odd number of brothers in the room, there was always that one person who voted to go back to literary society. So for the first year, they kept that side of the thing. It wasn't until that person stepped away that the vote changed toward fraternity. Well, Brother Jewel George Kelly was the one that was fighting for the fraternity. He was that guy that was kicking the door in. He was standing flat-footed. He knew what he wanted to do. He knew what he wanted to say. He wasn't a back-down kind of person. We got some Kellys in the audience. We got some Kellys in our chapters. We got some Kellys in our fraternity. If you don't believe me, go to General Convention.
Mm-hmm.
Go stand on the floor of the General Convention. You want to see the Kellys.
Yeah.
Them brothers register and show up.
Yeah.
All right? They are very vocal. They know what they want. They don't take no BS. And they will progressively move our fraternity forward. Thank God for Jewel George Biddle Kelly.
Yeah.
Are you a Murray? Jewel Nathaniel Allison Murray. This brother here was so confident in what he was doing. When I was researching to do the second book, my second book is called The Expansion of the Fraternity, because in the first 3 chapters of our history book are based on the founding and the expansion. And when they decided to expand, obviously you all know they went to Howard University and made Beta Chapter. And I thought about that because the history book states that they were considering Syracuse University as Beta Chapter, and that didn't work out. And I thought about it, and I was like, there are a lot of schools between Cornell and Washington.
Yeah.
Why did they choose to go all the way down to Washington when they didn't have social media, they didn't have cell phones, they didn't have the technology that we have today to communicate as fast as we communicate? So they passed by Rutgers, they passed by Trenton State University, they passed by Delaware State, they passed by all these schools and went down to Howard. Thank God they did. But they went down to Howard to make Beta Chapter. Why did they pass out all these schools? Well, in my research, I found that Nathaniel Allison Murray was from DC. And he went to a high school called the M School. And the M School was a very popular and academic school back then. And so he was a student there, but most of his friends who he graduated with went to Howard University. So he already knew these guys at Howard, they were friends. So it was easy for him to say, I know some caliber men who I think we should reach out to. Now what I didn't know was that his mother was a teacher at Howard University for a number of years. So he didn't go to the school that his mom was teaching at, he went to Cornell. So that was the connection between Beta Chapter and Alpha Chapter. It was the fact that not only did he know these guys that were from his high school, but his mom was teaching there. So she was able to facilitate a lot of the conversations that they were having. So this guy was confident when he reached out to them and said, look, we have a fraternity that we want you to be a part of. We have an organization we just started, and this is what we want you guys to do. He had to relate that without the imagery that we have today. You can look and see Alpha Phi Alpha out there. You can look and see Alpha Kappa Alpha out there. You can see Kappa Alpha Psi, Omega Psi Phi, Delta Sigma Theta. You see the work that we're all doing in our communities. You see the colors, the parades, the banners, the Founders Days, all of the events that we do. But back then they didn't have all that. They were on campuses by themselves for the most part. So to communicate the power of this organization to Beta Chapter, to the fact that they got founded just a mere 1 year and 14 days later, that's awesome to me. Howard University was a place at that time, to this day, where it was, black intelligence. It was students that were there that were progressively moving our race forward at that time. And so he reached out to the best of the best, to the point that the Dean of Men, who was Dean Kelly Miller, became a member of Beta Chapter. That's how influential this man was to get this chapter started. 17 guys came into that chapter. And Dean Miller said, you know what, I'm going to help you guys get this thing started. So he helped them as far as the administration get the chapter started. And when it started, he said, you know what, I want to be a part of that. That's the spirit of Jewel Nathaniel Allison Murray. Are you a Murray? Are you an Ogle? Jewel Robert Howard Ogle. This brother here, this is not in the history book. But I learned in my research that he met a young lady in Cornell. They began dating, and the next thing you know, she told him that she was pregnant. Okay? Now, they weren't married at the time, they were dating. So now he has a decision to make. A lot of them are young men today that don't have the father figure in the home, that don't have a real role model, face this very decision today. And so this young man had a decision to make. And he said, I'm going to do the honorable thing. I love this woman. I'm going to marry her. So they got married, right? She had their baby December 14, 1906. That is 10 days after the fraternity was founded. That means that the entire fall semester, she's 6, 7, 8, 9 months pregnant. So how do you, as a college sophomore, deal with having a pregnant wife in 1906 in a white town where black men were still being hung all over the country? His wife looked like she was white. She passed for a white woman. That's how light-skinned she was. This is what he's dealing with, but he never missed one meeting. He never missed an association meeting. He never, those late meetings they had, if you read about the history book, he was at every single one of them.
Wow.
His baby was born December 14, right? He then had a second daughter, born in February of 1908. A few months later, his wife passed away from complications of the birth. Now, he is a college junior. This man has 2 daughters. He is raising them as a single dad with the help of his mother-in-law. Yet he graduated and he never missed one meeting.
Wow.
You got brothers now that miss meetings, that got a wife and kids. You got brothers who are single who miss meetings. You got brothers who have nothing but excuses for missed meetings. And this man never missed one meeting in the entire 4 years he was at Cornell University. That's honorable. That is honorable. So how many of you are Ogles? How many of you would face when faced with a difficult decision, you make the right decision? How many of you, when faced with obstacles, you hurdle obstacles? See, we don't jump over obstacles, we run through them. That's how we think. That's how we roll. How many of you have the spirit of this man? This man was honorable. He raised his daughters by himself. By himself. That's honorable, y'all. In a time like that, that's honorable. So how many of you carry that spirit today? How many of you carry the spirit of Tandy? Jewel Berkeley was intended as a comedian. Every chapter has a comedian. I'll say it again. Every chapter has a comedian. That one bro who will crack a joke when it's not the time of his times to crack a joke in the chapter meeting. But that's how this guy was. Story has it, legend has it, that he traveled up to Canada for something and found out that he didn't have money to get back to Cornell. And so on his way back, he saw a church and he was going to go in there and ask for some money to help him get back. And he walked in the door and they were having a midnight revival service. So when he walked in, they said, "Oh, you're the preacher for the evening. Come on in, come on in." And so he sat down as the preacher for the evening. And he got up and preached that night and they raised him up for him and he got back home. So he's back home now. And a couple weeks later, the church called, they wanted him to come back to speak again. This is how this dude was. You know, another story, the story has it where he was in his room, him and King Jones were in the room, and the landlady used to complain about the noise. Because, you know, I was making noise. We stay up late, we party hard, how we do, and they make some noise, and so she would come in and just barge in the room and tell them to keep it quiet. She would not. She'd just walk in the room. So he's like, I'm gonna fix her. So one day he's making noise up in there, and he stripped down butt naked. Can I say butt naked in church? He stripped down butt naked. And so she walks in, and she never walked in again. This is the kind of spirit this man had, because you know what? Life is not always that serious. Sometimes you gotta laugh, you know? Sometimes you laugh to keep from crying. You know, there's not a person in here that has not either gone through, or about to go through something serious, some situation, okay? And there's some things in your personal life that you would never share with anybody. I don't care how close your line brother is, there's some things that you're going through.
Yeah.
And every now and then it's good to just smile. You know why? Because at the end of the day, God is good.
Yeah. Come on.
When I was living in New York, I attended my uncle's church in the Bronx. And he's actually here today. And one day I came to church, and there was a brother I used to always speak to. And I was just say, "Hi, how you doing, man?" You know, he'd speak back. And one day I walked in, I'll never forget this, I walked in, and he had his head down, and I was like, "Hey man, how you doing?" He said, "I'm not doing well." And he put his head back down, and I figured he didn't want to talk, so I just let him know. And at this time in my life, I recall I was working for Tommy Hilfiger, and when you work for a Tommy Hilfiger corporation, you have to wear Tommy suits to work. So he gives you, he makes the suits discounted so you can afford it. But everyone there had like 20 suits because you got to wear suits to work. And I only had 6 Tommy suits at the time, so I was kind of depressed that I only had 6 suits. And these are designers who only had 6 on the press, right? And so this guy is sitting here and he's looking sad, and I didn't want to bother him, so I left him alone. But then service began, and in the middle of the church service, he jumps out of his seat screaming, and the whole service stops. And he goes on this rant about his wife who had just left him for another man in their own neighborhood. And this guy was flaunting his wife around with his 2 kids. And this man told us in church that morning that the only reason that he didn't take his gun and blow their heads off was because something told him to go to church. And at that moment, I said to myself, you know what? Here I am crying over 6 suits. I have 6 designer suits, and there are people who have no suits.
Come on.
Here's this guy going through something way worse than I am. And I decided that day that I would never again be ungrateful. I would say thank you for the things that I have.
Yeah.
And to this day, in my wallet, I keep a picture of that man.
Yeah.
Because it reminds me that there's always somebody going through something worse than me. And it causes me to say, you know what, God is good, I can smile, and I can laugh. And I think that that's the way Tandy was. These guys had some extremely heated conversations. And so in the midst of those conversations, he would pass gas, and everyone would laugh. Every chapter has a Tandy. Are you that Tandy? And when Brother Becky called me and said, you know, I want you to come up and speak, and this is the theme for the event, it's the millennium, and you know, entrepreneurial and civil responsibility. I began to think about the jewels, and I said, you know, what jewels are we today? Where are we standing today in this fight that we have called civil rights? And when he told me that the event was at Canaan, I was honored because, we're standing on holy ground.
Yes,
You
yes,
know,
yes,
Wyatt T. Walker.
yes.
Wyatt T. Walker is a brother, and I mean the forefront of civil rights. I'm talking about the forefront of civil rights. We all know Dr. King, but King had a staff. And Mary was on his staff, and Wyatt T. Walker was on his staff, and these brothers were at the forefront of these marches. Somebody had to sit back and organize while he was preaching. And so to stand on this podium at this time, and to sit in these seats at this time, this is pivotal because the police department has declared war on black men. And if it's not for Alpha Phi Alpha to stand up and say enough is enough, then who is going to stand up? So we have to embody the spirit of our families. We have to embody the spirit of these men. These men were groundbreaking at this time. And so I think about the civil rights movement and how in the 60s, when something would happen in the community called the Alphas. If the police beat somebody, a single mom's son down, the first phone call she made was to the Alphas. And she would say, come help me because somebody beat my boy up. And the Alphas would show up. And when they showed up, they didn't show up just to march, they showed they made change. And that thing didn't happen again. We just had brothers marching in Chicago in the snow 2 weeks ago. We have brothers marching in Ferguson last year. We have brothers marching and making change all over this country because we have to embody the spirit of our founders. We have to continue the fight that our founders started 109 years ago. So I believe that civil rights and responsibility in our community is our mandate. It ain't something cute that we do. We don't do it to take pictures and get on social media. We do it to initiate change. Because if we don't, nobody will. We are the first to first. We are the leaders. We are the ones that take charge and make things happen. We have to now because we are Alpha Phi Alpha. And then I begin to think about entrepreneurism. And this blew my mind because I've been an entrepreneur for 17 years. And I've run my own business, and many of you are business owners, so you know the struggle that it takes to get your own business off the ground and make that thing operable and to make it work. And I remember a year and a half ago, I was in Baltimore for the Eastern Region Convention. And I was there as a vendor, and I was selling books, and I'm out there, and I usually have a friend of mine or a friend or two helping me out. And this particular convention, I had a young lady who was there who was in a sorority, and she said to me, Darrius, I've attended different events before. I've been at a fraternity convention before. I've been at the Eastern Region before, just not Alpha Phi Alpha. This is my first Alpha convention. And for some odd reason, I can't figure out why. I can't put my finger on it, but something different is about this group right here. I don't understand what it is. I need your help. I want you to tell me what is it that I can't. I mean, they had suits on at the other convention. They had workshops at the other convention. They had vendors at the other convention. But there's something different about this one, and I can't figure out what it is. I said, I'll tell you what it is. I said, there is a stereotype for each organization. Okay? And on the undergraduate level, a lot of young men and young ladies gravitate to that stereotype. Of course, the exceptions to the rule, but it does happen. Now, the stereotype for Alpha Phi Alpha is that we are the brainiacs, we're the scholarly, we're the students, we're the nerds, we're the ones that the book guys, we're in the library, we're whatever, right? If you look at your high school friends, that nerd now is probably a CEO somewhere, right? So Alpha Phi Alpha is a group of CEOs. Most of us run or are in charge of some capacity of our personal organizations. So when you get a room together of a bunch of CEOs who are used to being in charge at their home, who are used to being in charge at their office, who are used to being in charge, and put them all in the same room, they begin to argue. Because we all are used to being in charge. We're used to being the leader of whatever it is that we're doing. So when you put that on in a convention, that spirit is what's in the air. The spirit of leadership is in the air. This is not just an organization. This is not just a brotherhood. This is a brotherhood that is an organization of leaders. This is a brotherhood that is an organization of first-timers. This is a brotherhood of people who are used to being in charge. And that's why we're so selective when we initiate brothers in an organization. Because every black man is not cut from the same cloth. There's nothing wrong with that. There are other options out there. I mean, think about it. We gotta beat somebody as that shows. We have a responsibility to continue the leadership that was started 109 years ago.
Yeah.
That is not just something I'm saying. It's not a cute words to a speech. It is a mandate. And if you are not living according to that mandate, then brother, I question your motives today. I challenge you to look in your own personal mirror and remember why you came to the organization in the first place. Why did you do this? Why did you come in here in the first place? What did you say to that brother that voted you in? Think back to what you said to him. Did you say, I want the brotherhood, I want to be here for life, I want to be a part of this magnificent organization? What did you say back then? Was it just words to get in, or did you mean it? Are you a man about your words? Did you say what you really meant, or did you say what you wanted to say to get in? How many meetings have you missed? How many of you are financially active? Financially. I'm not questioning the brothers in the room. I believe you all are. But there are a lot of brothers who live in New York who aren't here. A lot of them. A lot of them have good reasons not to be here. A lot of them have no good reason why they shouldn't be here. But when it's time to we all should be together. In some event somewhere. Honoring the legacy of what brings us together and we have a common bond. Why are we in the same room at the same time, in the same colors? Because of these 7 guys. And if we can't honor them once a year, then I challenge you to look in the mirror and question your own personal motives. Why are you here? Which one of these jewels do you embody in your spirit every single day, on Wednesday, on Friday, on Tuesday? What are you standing for? Are you a Callis? Are you a Murray? Are you a Jones? Are you an influencer? Are you a thinker? Are you a comedian? Are you a motivator? Are you confident? Because we are all those things. We are the embodiment of all these things. We are all thinkers. We are businessmen. We are entrepreneurs. We are authors. We are pastors. We are teachers. We are brothers. We are service leaders. We are in the community. We are executives. We are business owners. We are bankers. We are speakers. We are athletes and coaches. We are defense attorneys and prosecutors. We are judges. We are criminal attorneys. We are doctors and we are lawyers. We are everything that this country needs. We are everything that this country needs. Why? Because my brothers, in fact, we are the college of friendship. We are the university of brotherly love. We are the school for what? The better making of men. Because my brothers, we are Alpha Phi.